During breakfast, my daughter smiled and said, "I have a surprise for you." She handed me an envelope, and inside was her husband's debt, $400,000. "It has to be paid by Monday," she said. Daniel added coldly, "or we all lose everything." When I refused, Sarah threw hot coffee at me, and Daniel shouted, "Get out!" An hour later, the police arrived. But that was only the beginning of the revenge that would destroy their lives forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are right now? The morning light streamed through my kitchen windows, spreading soft shadows across the linoleum floor. Steam rose from my coffee mug as I turned another page of the Boston Tribune, scanning the sports section with practiced disinterest. October in Boston always carried that clean edge, the kind that made the air sharper, the light clearer, even my thoughts more precise. "Dad, I've got a surprise for you." Sarah's voice carried that bright tone she used when she wanted something. I looked up from my newspaper and saw her standing in the doorway, clutching a manila envelope against her chest like it was both a gift and a shield. Her smile was too wide, and something uneasy flickered in her eyes. Daniel appeared behind her, arms crossed, leaning against my kitchen counter with the confidence of a man who didn't belong here but wanted to act like he did. This was my house, my kitchen, my morning routine. What kind of surprise? I folded the paper carefully, setting it beside my plate of half-eaten toast. The coffee had gone lukewarm, but I took another sip, studying their faces as I did. Sarah laughed, but it sounded rehearsed. "Just open it. You'll see." She thrust the envelope toward me with trembling fingers. The return address caught my attention first, a law firm downtown I'd never heard of. The envelope felt heavy, stuffed with papers that rustled as I turned it in my hands. "Go ahead, Michael," Daniel said, his tone cutting through the quiet morning. "We've been waiting to share this with you." The envelope tore easily. A pile of papers spilled across the table. Official letterheads, long columns of numbers, signatures that looked disturbingly familiar. My eyes darted from page to page, trying to make sense of it. Credit card statements, loan documents, casino receipts, all with my name on them, all showing balances that made my chest tighten. "What the hell is this?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but the coffee cup was shaking in my hand. I set it down before I spilled it. "Those are your debts, Dad." Sarah's cheerful tone was gone, replaced by something colder. "We found them when we were helping you organize your papers last month. Remember?" I didn't remember. I remembered them offering to help, sorting through my desk drawers and filing cabinets while I made lunch, but I sure as hell didn't remember signing up for $400,000 in gambling debt. "I've never been to a casino in my life," I said, spreading the papers across the table. Each page was worse than the last. Las Vegas, Atlantic City, even riverboat casinos in places I'd never visited. Daniel stepped closer, his presence suddenly heavy in my own kitchen. "Memory isn't what it used to be, is it?" he said. "Those signatures look pretty real to me." The handwriting did look like mine, too much like mine. I picked up one of the credit statements and held it toward the light. The signature was perfect. Every loop, every curve, every detail exactly as I would have written it. "These need to be paid by Monday," Daniel said, his tone flat and businesslike. "Otherwise, we lose everything. The house, the cars, all of it Monday." It was Monday. Sarah moved closer to stand beside her husband, a united front now. "We can't let that happen, Dad. We've got nowhere else to go." I looked up at my daughter, 35 years old, standing in my kitchen with tears glistening in her eyes, clutching papers that could ruin me. The same daughter I'd raised alone after her mother died, the same girl I'd put through college, supported through every rough patch, helped with her wedding, carried through Daniel's endless job failures. And now, she looked at me like I was the problem. "I didn't sign these," I said quietly but firmly. "Someone forged my name." "Who would do that?" Sarah's voice trembled, but her tears felt too perfectly timed. "Who Who else even knows your personal information, Dad? Your social security number, your mother's maiden name, all those security questions. The implication hung between us like smoke. Daniel shifted slightly, and I caught a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes before he looked away. We need to fix this together, Sarah said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. As a family. But first, we have to pay these debts before the creditors come for the house. I pulled my hand back. Then I stood up slowly, my joints stiff from anger and disbelief. The papers scattered across the table like a storm of lies and forged signatures, spreading over the surface where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for 30 years. This isn't over, I said, looking from Sarah to Daniel and back again. Not by a long shot. Sarah's tears came faster now, streaming down her cheeks like a well-rehearsed performance. Dad, please. We're family. How can you even question this? She stepped toward me, hands outstretched, her voice pleading. Think about everything we've been through. Mom's funeral, my wedding, all those times you said family comes first. Family doesn't forge signatures, I said flatly. Family doesn't create fake debts. Daniel pushed off from the counter, stepping closer until he was blocking the kitchen doorway. Now, hold on there, Michael, he said. Those documents are legal and binding. Your signature, your social security number, your responsibility. My responsibility. The laugh that came out of me was cold and humorless. I've never gambled a day in my life. Ask anyone who knows me. People change, Sarah said softly, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, the same gesture she used to make when she was a little girl with scraped knees. Maybe you forgot, Dad. Maybe the stress of living alone, managing everything by yourself. I'm not senile. The words came out harder than I meant, but her careful tone, that calculated pity, made my skin crawl. Daniel took another step forward. Look around, old man. You really think you can handle this place forever? The yard work, the maintenance, the bills. I keep track just fine, I said. Do you? Sarah's tone sharpened. Because we found these mixed in with your insurance papers and tax returns. If you were really on top of things, wouldn't you have noticed $400,000 in debt? She had a point, and she knew it. The papers had been filed neatly in my desk drawer, tucked between my homeowner's policy and last year's tax forms. Someone had planted them there deliberately, blending them in so well that even I might have overlooked them. We're trying to help you, Daniel said, his voice calm, almost patronizing. Sarah and I talked about this for weeks before bringing it to you. We could have just let the collectors come and take the house, but we wanted to give you a chance to make this right. Make what right? I snapped. I didn't do anything wrong. Then why are your signatures on every document? Sarah lifted one of the credit card statements from the pile like an attorney presenting evidence. Look at this handwriting, Dad. Look at it carefully, I looked. The signature was mine, not just similar, but perfect. The way I dotted my I's, the slight tilt in the letters, even the pressure marks where the pen always caught on the paper. Anyone can learn to copy a signature, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. In 37 different places? Daniel held up another thick stack of papers. Credit applications, loan documents, casino markers, all signed over the past 6 months. You think someone followed you around for half a year forging your name? Sarah stepped closer, her tears gone, replaced by cold resolve. We're not asking you to admit anything. We're asking you to take responsibility. These debts exist, Dad. They're in your name. If they don't get paid, we all lose everything. I looked around my kitchen, the coffee pot, the dishes in the sink, my calendar on the refrigerator with my handwriting marking doctor's appointments and grocery lists. My house. This is my home, I said. Technically, yes, Daniel replied, a faint smile playing at his lips. But Sarah's been helping with expenses for months. The property taxes last spring. Remember the new roof in August? She's got receipts for all of it, I did remember. Sarah had insisted on helping when I mentioned the tax bill, saying it was the least she could do after everything I'd given her. The roof repair had been her idea too, claiming she was worried about leaks. Besides, Sarah added quietly, where are we supposed to go if they take the house? Daniel's been out of work for 3 months. We've been staying here because we literally have nowhere else. That was news to me. I thought their constant visits were out of love, not necessity. If you don't pay these debts, Daniel said, the creditors will come after everything. The cars, the house, even Sarah's jewelry. Then what? We'll all be living in a shelter while lawyers divide up what's left. Sarah sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. I can't believe this is happening. I thought we could handle it as a family, but if you keep denying responsibility, they're not my actions, I said firmly. But even as I spoke, doubt crept in. The signatures were too perfect, too consistent. And she was right about one thing. If someone had been forging my name, why would they make it look like gambling debts? Why not something more profitable? We need a solution, Daniel said, shifting into a businesslike tone. Today, before the creditors start calling. Sarah's chair scraped against the linoleum as she shot to her feet. The tears were gone now, replaced by fury. You know what? I'm done with this. Her voice cracked like a whip. We've tried to reason with you, but you're too selfish to care about anyone but yourself. She stormed toward the coffee pot, movements sharp and unsteady. 35 years I've been your daughter. 35 years of putting up with your stubborn, self-righteous attitude. Sarah, calm down, I said, but something in her posture made me step back. Calm down? She spun around, coffee pot in hand, steam curling from the glass. My husband can't find work. We're about to lose everything, and you sit there pretending none of it's your fault. The pot trembled in her grip. Her knuckles were white around the handle. I raised you better than this, I said quietly. You raised me to clean up your messes, she screamed, and then the pot moved, an arc of scalding coffee cutting through the air. I saw it coming but couldn't move fast enough. The liquid hit me like fire, searing through my flannel shirt and undershirt. I gasped, stumbling backward as the pain spread across my chest. Jesus, Sarah! The burn was immediate and brutal, like a hot iron pressed to my ribs. I clawed at my soaked shirt, but the damage was already done. She froze, the empty pot still in her hands, her face pale with shock. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Daniel stepped forward, and his expression wasn't shocked at all. It was satisfied. Get out, old man, he said, calm and deliberate. This is our house now. Pack what you can carry and leave. This is my house, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady despite the pain. I'm the one on the deed. I've paid the mortgage for 30 years, not any more. Daniel stepped closer, the smell of cigarettes clinging to him. Those debts change everything. By tomorrow, the creditors will have liens on this property, but Sarah and I can work something out with them. We've got nothing left to lose. I looked at my daughter, still clutching the empty pot, her breathing uneven. The woman who once curled up next to me on the couch to watch cartoons, the girl I taught to ride a bike in the driveway, the bride I walked down the aisle just 3 years ago. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. You planned this, I said slowly, the realization spreading cold through my veins. Both of you. The documents, the timing, everything we planned to solve a problem, Daniel said smoothly. Your problem, the one you created with your gambling, your debts, your lies. The wet shirt clung to my burned skin, each breath sending another wave of pain through me. But worse than the physical burn was the betrayal, the way they looked at me as if I were a burden to be erased. I need to change clothes, I muttered, turning toward the hallway. Daniel stepped in front of me. 5 minutes, he said. Pack light. We'll send the rest later, if we feel like it. I met his eyes. This man I'd welcomed into my home, fed at my table, helped every time he lost another job. Move, I said. Something in my tone must have convinced him I wasn't bluffing, because he finally stepped aside. But I could feel both their eyes on me as I walked away, the tension following like smoke. Each step down the hallway felt longer than it should. My chest burned, every movement sending fresh pain across my ribs. Behind me, I heard their voices, low, hurried whispers, but I didn't need to know what they were planning. I already knew. When I reached my bedroom, I closed the door with a soft click. For the first time all morning, I was alone. I peeled off the soaked shirt carefully, wincing as it tugged at my raw skin. The burns were angry red but shallow. Painful. Not fatal. In the mirror above my dresser, I saw a man who looked older than he had yesterday. A man who'd just been betrayed by the only family he had left. But my eyes were steady, and my hands didn't shake as I reached for a clean shirt. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd humiliated me into silence, but they had no idea what they'd just started. I slipped on a white cotton shirt, the fabric cool against my burns. My hands moved automatically, buttoning each one with mechanical precision. 30 years of morning routines etched into muscle memory. From the closet, I pulled down an old suitcase. It hit the floor with a dull thud that echoed through the quiet room. I could still hear them in the kitchen, voices low but urgent, planning their next move, maybe dividing my possessions already. Into the suitcase went 3 days' worth of clothes, my prescription bottles, and a single manila folder from the bottom of my desk drawer, the one they hadn't found yet. Inside were the only papers that mattered: the property deed, insurance documents, birth certificate, and the will I'd written after Sarah's wedding. Everything that proved this house still belonged to me and that their little coup wasn't going to stand. As I zipped up the suitcase, a slow calm settled over me, the kind that comes just before a storm breaks. They thought I was finished, but this was only the beginning. My wallet held $200 in cash, not much, but enough to get by until I figured out my next move. The car keys jingled softly as I slipped them into my pocket beside my phone. 10 minutes. That's all the time I allowed myself before closing the suitcase and heading for the back door. I couldn't risk another confrontation in the hallway, not when Daniel might decide words weren't enough anymore. The October air sliced through my shirt like a blade, sharp and cleansing after the suffocating tension inside. My burned chest ached against the cold, but I kept walking across the backyard toward the fence line that separated my property from Robert's. Robert Hayes had lived next door for 15 years, ever since retiring from teaching high school history. We'd shared plenty of conversations over that fence, about the Red Sox, about the weather, about the slow decline of the neighborhood since younger families started moving in. But I'd never once imposed on him, never shown up at his door looking like a refugee from my own life. His kitchen light was on. Through the window, I saw him reading a newspaper, coffee mug in hand. Normal morning routine, the kind I'd been enjoying myself less than an hour earlier. I knocked on his back door, trying to sound casual rather than desperate. Robert opened it, wearing a blue robe and an expression that deepened with concern the moment he saw my face. "Michael, what happened?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." Worse than that. I shifted the suitcase to my other hand, feeling the weight of everything I'd managed to grab. "I need to ask a favor if you don't mind." "Can I come in for a few minutes?" He stepped back immediately, waving me inside with the same quiet hospitality he'd always shown when I borrowed a tool or returned a book. His kitchen was warm, smelling of bacon and toasted bread, the kind of comforting morning I'd lost somewhere between Sarah's envelope and her coffee attack. "Sit down," he said, gesturing toward the table by the window. "You want some coffee? Something to eat?" "Coffee would be good." I set the suitcase beside my chair and lowered myself carefully, trying not to wince as the burns pulled against my shirt. "I've got a story to tell you, Robert," I said finally. "Not a good one." He poured me a mug, faded Boston Red Sox logo peeling at the edges, and slid it across the table before sitting opposite me. "I'm listening. Where do I even start? With this morning's betrayal, or the pattern I should have recognized years ago?" 4 years ago, I took in Sarah and Daniel when they said they just needed a little help getting back on their feet. The words felt strange in my mouth, like confessing to a crime I didn't realize I'd committed. Biggest mistake I ever made. Robert's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. Teacher instinct, maybe. Let the story unfold. I thought I was helping family. I took a sip of coffee, the warmth soothing my throat but not my anger. Turns out I was feeding two people who saw me as nothing more than a walking wallet. Robert leaned forward, his own coffee forgotten. What kind of help are we talking about? It started small, I said. Sarah called, said Daniel lost another job. They couldn't make rent. Could they stay in my spare room for a month, just until he found something new? I stared into the coffee, seeing my reflection distorted in the surface. 1 month turned into 6, 6 months turned into 4 years, and Daniel, he never really worked. Oh, he found jobs, I continued bitterly. Lost them too. 3 in the first year alone, always someone else's fault, some boss who didn't appreciate his potential. I could feel old frustration building again, the kind that had simmered for years under the surface. But that wasn't the real problem. Robert waited, silent, patient. The real problem started in my garage. I set the mug down with more force than I meant to. I've had my tools organized the same way for 30 years, everything labeled, everything in its place. Daniel decided that was inefficient. I paced toward the window, voice tightening. I came home one day, and he'd rearranged everything. When I asked why, you know what he said? Robert shook his head. What? This is our garage now, Michael. We're all family here. Even after 4 years, the memory stung. Our garage, in my house, with my tools, I muttered. Tools I'd collected over decades of work. Robert's face darkened. He actually said that? Like he was doing me a favor, I said. Like I should be grateful he was taking charge of my own property. I turned back toward the window, watching my own house from across the yard. That should have been my first warning. But Sarah defended him, said he was just trying to help, trying to make things more organized. How did Sarah react when you objected? Robert asked. I exhaled slowly. She didn't. That was the problem. Her husband had taken over my home, rearranged my belongings, claimed my space, and she treated it like it was normal, like I was unreasonable for wanting boundaries. Through the window, I could see faint movement inside my kitchen, shadows crossing behind the curtains. They were still there, still acting like the house they'd tried to steal was theirs. It got worse, I said, turning back. Robert nodded, focused. Daniel started treating the entire place like it was his. Ate my food without asking, drove my car when his broke down, invited his friends over for poker nights that lasted until 3 in the morning. And Sarah? She always made excuses. I could feel the years of frustration boiling to the surface. When I complained about the noise, she said I was too sensitive. When his friends drank my beer, she said I was being selfish. When he brought home stray dogs without asking, she called me heartless. Robert's expression hardened. And this went on for 4 years? It escalated, I said, sinking back into the chair, suddenly exhausted by the weight of it all. The boundary violations got worse, bigger, bolder. Last year, Daniel convinced me to invest in some business opportunity, a food truck franchise that was guaranteed to turn a profit. Robert frowned. How much? $15,000. My entire savings, I laughed bitterly. Guess what happened to that food truck? It never existed? Oh, it existed, I said. He bought it, used it for 3 weeks, then sold it to pay off some mystery debt. When I confronted him, he said the business model was flawed, and he was protecting me from further losses. Robert's coffee mug hit the table with a sharp click. He stole $15,000 from you and called it protection? Sarah backed him up, I said, shaking my head. Said he made the best decision he could under difficult circumstances, that I should be grateful he minimized my losses. The memory still made my chest tighten with anger. Grateful. For being robbed by my own family. Robert's voice softened. Why didn't you throw them out then? The question I've been asking myself for the last hour, I admitted. Because she's my daughter. Because I kept thinking it was temporary, that Daniel would finally get his act together. Because every time I tried to set a boundary, Sarah cried about loyalty and how much they needed me. Robert stood, refilling both our mugs in silence, giving me time to breathe. This morning was different, I said. They showed me documents, claims that I owe $400,000 in gambling debts. My name forged on every page, $400,000? Robert's voice rose. Credit statements, payment schedules, collection notices, all very official. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photos I'd taken before I left. Look at this signature. Tell me it doesn't look like mine. Robert studied the screen, his expression growing darker with every swipe. This is fraud, Michael. Criminal fraud. That's what I told them. He looked up. And then? I swallowed hard. When I refused to pay, Sarah threw a pot of hot coffee at me. Robert's face drained of color as his eyes flicked to the red skin above my collar. She actually burned you? I nodded, the memory searing fresh in my mind. She's not the same person anymore, Robert, I said quietly. Or maybe she never was. Or maybe she never was the person I thought she was. I unbuttoned the top of my shirt to show Robert the extent of the burns. The red skin glared against the morning light. But that's not even the worst part, I said quietly. You want to know where those debts really came from? He nodded grimly. Daniel's got a gambling problem that makes my supposed addiction look like pocket change. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips to Indiana and Maine. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through screenshots I'd managed to capture, pages of betting sites left open on my computer. He's been using my internet, my credit cards, even my social security number to make accounts. Robert frowned. How do you know all this? Because he got sloppy, I said. Stopped logging out of his accounts. I found betting histories going back 2 years, thousands of dollars lost every month. I turned the screen toward him. Look at these transactions. 500 here, 800 there. Then $3,000 and $4,000 bets on football games. Robert studied the images, shaking his head. This is massive fraud. It gets worse. I swiped again, showing another set of messages. When the gambling sites cut him off for exceeding limits, he turned to loan sharks. I found texts on his phone, names like Fat Tony and Ice Mike. These aren't bankers, Robert. These are dangerous people. His brow furrowed. How much does he owe? Near as I can tell, $300,000 in gambling debts, another $100,000 in interest and penalties. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, the number still echoing in my head. But here's the kicker, I said. He's been arrested before for writing fraudulent checks, got out on bail. Trials next month, Robert's expression hardened. And Sarah knew? Oh, she knew, I said. She knew about the gambling, the arrest, the forged documents, all of it. This whole setup was meant to make me responsible for his debts before the trial begins. Robert's hands tightened into fists. That's why they wanted you out of the house today. Once you're gone, they can claim residency and force the creditors to negotiate with them instead of coming after you. Exactly, I said. And Sarah's name isn't on any of the debt paperwork, so legally she's clean. Daniel takes the fall, goes to prison, and she keeps the house she never paid a cent for. I could see the entire plot laid out now, like a blueprint for betrayal. 4 years of calculated setup, the boundary violations, the emotional manipulation, the financial traps, all leading to this. They've been playing this game for years, I said bitterly, piece by piece. I just didn't want to see it. Robert's face tightened with understanding. They groomed you, Michael, bit by bit, made you doubt yourself, depend on them, classic manipulation, and I let them do it, I said. I made excuses, rationalized everything, convinced myself it was just family tension. I turned toward the window, staring at my house. Through the kitchen curtains, faint shadows still moved back and forth. I enabled my own destruction. Robert pushed his chair back sharply, the legs scraping against the linoleum. This has gone far enough. We're calling the police. Police? The word hit me like a jolt. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Ready? Robert's tone carried that unmistakable authority of a man who'd spent decades dealing with teenage excuses. Michael, they've committed identity theft, fraud, assault, and extortion. Your daughter threw boiling coffee at you. What more do you need to be ready for? I looked down at my trembling hands. Part of me still wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding, that Sarah wasn't capable of such cold cruelty. "She's still my daughter," I said weakly. "No," Robert said firmly, though his voice softened slightly. "Your daughter died a long time ago. The woman in your kitchen is a criminal who happens to share your DNA." He moved to the old landline mounted on the wall, a relic of simpler times. "We're calling 911 now, before they destroy evidence or disappear with whatever else they can grab." I wanted to argue, to find one more reason to delay, anything to avoid admitting that my family had become my enemy. But Robert was right. The version of me that raised Sarah with love and patience had already been burned away, literally and figuratively. "Make the call," he said. Robert's hand slammed the table hard enough to make both coffee mugs jump. "This isn't family drama, Michael. It's criminal behavior, multiple felonies." I stared at the phone on the wall, its coiled cord looping down like a lifeline, and a sentence. Such a simple act, and yet it would change everything. "I know you're right," I said quietly. "It's just, she's still my daughter." Robert stood taller, his old teacher's presence filling the room. "Your daughter wouldn't throw scalding coffee at her father," he said. "Your daughter wouldn't forge documents to steal your home. The woman in that kitchen is not your child anymore." He lifted the handset and held it out to me. "They assaulted you in your own house. They stole your identity. They tried to erase you. If you don't make this call, they'll destroy every trace of evidence and vanish with everything you worked for." The handset felt heavier than it should have when I took it. "What if Sarah goes to jail?" I asked. Robert's voice cut through my hesitation like a blade. "What if she kills you next time?" I froze. "Because there will be a next time," he continued, his tone calm but deadly serious. "People like this don't stop. Not until someone stops them first." I glanced at the burn marks above my collar, the angry red patches that still throbbed where her coffee had hit me. The pain was constant, the proof undeniable. "You're right," I said finally. I lifted the handset and pressed the numbers. 2 rings, then a calm, steady voice. 911. "What's your emergency?" "I need to report a domestic assault," I said. The words sounded foreign in my mouth, but they were the truth. "I was attacked in my own home this morning." "Are you injured, sir?" "Yes," I said. "Coffee burns on my chest and neck. My daughter threw it during an argument. Are you in a safe location now?" "Yes." I'm at my neighbor's house. I gave her Robert's address, my voice growing steadier with every factual detail. "Can you tell me about the person who attacked you?" "My daughter, Sarah Thompson. She and her husband, Daniel, have been living in my house. They presented me with fraudulent debt papers this morning, demanding payment for $400,000 in gambling debts I never had." The dispatcher's tone remained calm but professional. "When you refused to pay, she became violent?" "Yes, and her husband threatened me too, told me to leave my own house." "Are they still at your residence?" "Yes, both of them. Sarah Thompson and Daniel Thompson." I spelled out their names carefully, giving their approximate ages and descriptions. "Officers are being dispatched to your location," she said. "Can you stay where you are until they arrive?" "Yes." "Estimated response time is 15 to 20 minutes, she continued. "Do you need medical attention?" I touched the tender skin near my collar. "I don't think so." "The burns aren't severe enough for a hospital. An officer will assess your injuries when they arrive," she said. "Please remain on the line while I gather additional information." She asked about weapons in the house, any past incidents of violence, and whether Sarah and Daniel might try to flee once they saw the police coming. Robert stood beside me silently the whole time, arms folded, jaw tight, his face set in that grim protective expression of someone watching justice finally catch up to evil. I answered each question as clearly and calmly as I could, feeling Robert's quiet strength beside me. When the call finally ended, I set the handset back into its cradle with hands steadier than they'd been all morning. "How do you feel?" Robert asked. "Like I just crossed a bridge I can never uncross," I said. I looked toward the window facing my house, where the people who used to be my family were probably still wandering through rooms they had stolen from me. But it was the right thing to do, Robert said. I nodded slowly. It was. He checked his watch. 20 minutes. Think they'll try to run? No, I said. At least not yet. They still think they've won. They think I'm too weak to fight back. They're about to learn otherwise. Come on, Robert said gently. Let me show you where you'll be staying. He led me down the hallway to a small guest room that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Make yourself comfortable, he said. We've got some time before the officers arrive. The room was simple but peaceful. A single bed covered with a blue quilt, a nightstand with a reading lamp, a small dresser with a mirror. Nothing extravagant, but clean, organized, and safe in a way my own home hadn't felt in years. I set my suitcase on the bed and began unpacking methodically. 3 shirts, underwear, socks, my prescription bottles for blood pressure and cholesterol. The ordinary act of organizing my things helped steady me after the adrenaline of that call. You take your time, Robert said from the doorway, holding a steaming mug. Chamomile, good for the nerves. Thanks, I said, accepting it with both hands. The irony wasn't lost on me. A few hours ago, a hot drink had been used as a weapon. Now, it was a gesture of kindness. Robert, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed, I need to ask you something. Do you know any lawyers? He pulled out the small chair by the window and sat down, thoughtful. I know a few. Some were parents of my old students. Others went into law themselves. What kind of attorney are you looking for? Property law, for starters, I said. I need to make sure Sarah and Daniel can't claim any right to my house. And probably family law, too. I have no idea what happens legally when your own daughter commits assault and fraud against you. There's also the criminal side, he said. The prosecutor will handle that, but you'll want your own lawyer to protect your interests. He scrolled through his contacts. I know someone who specializes in elder abuse cases. Elder abuse? The term hit me harder than expected. Is that what this is? Financial exploitation by family members, physical assault, emotional manipulation. Yes, Michael, he said softly but firmly. That's exactly what this is. And there are specific laws to protect people in your position. I set down the tea and walked to the window, looking across the yard at my house. The kitchen curtains were closed now, hiding whatever they were doing inside, probably destroying evidence. How long will this take? I asked quietly. The legal process? Robert checked his watch again. Depends on what the officers find when they search the house. Whether Sarah and Daniel get lawyers, if they fight the charges or make a plea deal, could be months, maybe longer if it goes to trial. He leaned back in the chair. In the meantime, you stay here as long as you need to. I've got the room, and frankly, I could use the company. He smiled lightly, but his eyes stayed serious. Besides, someone needs to make sure you're safe while this all plays out. The grandfather clock in his living room chimed 9 times, its echo soft but steady. I hadn't realized how long we'd been talking, almost 20 minutes. Any moment now, Robert said, the police will be here. Are you ready for this? He asked quietly. I thought about Sarah as a child, climbing into my lap for bedtime stories, her tiny hands clutching my shirt. Then I thought of her this morning, hurling scalding coffee with deliberate aim. No, I said honestly, but I'm going to do it anyway. Through the window, I saw flashing lights reflecting off parked cars as a black and white patrol car turned onto the street. It slowed, the officer inside checking house numbers. They're here, I said. Robert stood, straightening his shirt as if preparing for a job interview. Let's go get justice. The first patrol car pulled into Robert's driveway with quiet precision, followed by a second that stopped near the curb. 2 officers stepped out, a tall woman with gray-streaked hair and a younger man who moved with the cautious alertness of someone trained for the unexpected. I met them at Robert's front door, my hands steady now that the moment had come. "Mr. Fisher," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Officer Martinez, and this is Officer Chen. We're responding to your domestic assault call." "Thank you for coming," I said, shaking their hands. Martinez's eyes immediately flicked to the burns on my neck. "Can we see your injuries, sir?" I unbuttoned my shirt just enough to reveal the coffee burns across my chest. Officer Chen raised a camera, taking quick photographs as Martinez jotted notes. "Tell us about the incident," Martinez said. "Start from the beginning." I told them everything in order: the envelope, the fraudulent documents, Daniel's threats, and Sarah's sudden violence. My voice stayed steady, factual, detached. Chen paused mid-note. "Do you have the documents they showed you?" "They're still in the house," I said. "I had to leave them behind when I ran." Martinez and Chen exchanged a brief look that told me they'd seen cases like this before. "We'll need to speak with the other parties and collect evidence," Martinez said. "Would you be willing to come with us and point out the documents?" "Of course." The walk across the yard felt longer than it should have, the cool night air buzzing with quiet tension. Robert walked beside me, and the officers flanked us like a silent escort. My house looked smaller now, dim, lifeless, as if Sarah and Daniel's presence had poisoned it from the inside out. Officer Chen stepped forward and knocked firmly on the door. "Police! Open up!" Inside, muffled voices scrambled in panic. Then Sarah's voice, strained and trembling. "Just a minute." The door opened a crack. Sarah's face went pale at the sight of the uniforms. Behind her, Daniel appeared, his expression shifting from shock to calculation in seconds. That was the first time I'd seen real fear in their eyes. "Sarah Thompson," Officer Martinez said firmly, stepping forward. "We need to speak with you about an incident that occurred here this morning." "I don't know what you're talking about." Sarah's voice was higher than usual, tight with panic, strained under the weight of feigned innocence. "We have a complaint of domestic assault," Martinez continued calmly. Officer Chen moved to separate the parties, motioning for Daniel to step outside. "We'll need to interview you separately." I stood on the front lawn beside Robert, watching as the officers took control of the situation with calm, practiced precision. Sarah was escorted to the living room while Daniel was positioned near the patrol car, both clearly rattled by the sudden intrusion of law enforcement. 20 minutes later, after photographing the coffee stains on the floor and reviewing the scattered debt documents on my kitchen table, Officer Martinez returned to where I waited with Robert. "Mr. Fisher," she said, "based on the evidence and the statements gathered, we have probable cause to make arrests." Through the window, I watched as Officer Chen spoke into his radio, calling for backup in a transport vehicle. "Sarah Thompson, you're under arrest for domestic battery," Martinez announced, her voice steady and clear as she read Sarah her rights. "You have the right to remain silent." Sarah's protests echoed through the house. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to hurt him." But Daniel's reaction was something else entirely. As Chen placed the cuffs on him, his face twisted into raw fury. "This is harassment. The old man did this to himself." Even in that moment, caught red-handed with forged documents, facing police, with visible evidence of his crimes, he refused to take responsibility. It was always someone else's fault. The transport van arrived minutes later. I stood beside Robert as Sarah and Daniel were led out in separate directions. Sarah was crying, her mascara streaking dark down her cheeks. Daniel kept shouting until the van doors closed, cutting off his angry voice mid-sentence. Officer Martinez handed me a small card with a case number and the prosecutor's contact information. "Someone from the DA's office will reach out regarding charges and court scheduling," she said. As the vehicles drove away, taking my daughter and her husband to jail, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not joy. Not revenge. just the quiet relief that the lies, the manipulation, and the fear were finally over. Robert placed a hand on my shoulder. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's go home." 3 weeks later, I was reading the Boston Tribune's local section when I heard a knock at the door. Robert stood there, holding a thick manila envelope and wearing the cautious look of someone who'd just found something important. "You'll want to see this," he said, stepping inside and settling into the same kitchen chair where Sarah once handed me her forged documents. "I've been keeping track of the court filings, just to make sure you're protected." The envelope contained photocopies of legal papers with Daniel Thompson's name printed in bold across the top. Bankruptcy petition, creditor lawsuits, probation violation hearing, employment termination notice. "How did you get all this?" I asked. "Public records," Robert said simply. "Court clerk's office, bankruptcy court, county database. It's all there if you know where to look." I scanned the bankruptcy filing first. Chapter 7, Complete Liquidation of Assets. The man who tried to steal my home was now begging a federal judge to erase $300,000 in gambling debts. "Look at this one," Robert said, pointing to a letter from Midwest Credit Recovery. His car got repossessed 2 days after the arrest. Couldn't keep up the payments once Sarah's income disappeared. Then came the employment termination letter. Daniel's construction company had fired him immediately upon learning about his domestic violence arrest. "Standard policy for anyone charged with violent crimes," the letter read, in cold corporate language. "Where's he living now?" I asked, though I already had a feeling. "Salvation Army shelter on Harrison Street," Robert said, pulling out another document, a court-filed change of address. "And Sarah?" Robert hesitated. "Filed for divorce while she was still in jail. Froze their joint bank account, too, what little was left in it." I studied the divorce papers, noting Sarah's signature beside the words, "Cook County Detention Center." Even facing charges of her own, she'd moved quickly to cut ties with the man she'd once defended at all costs. "The IRS is after him, too," Robert added, flipping another page. "Unreported gambling winnings from the past 3 years. They're claiming $40,000 in back taxes and penalties." The audit notice was dated just 5 days after Daniel's arrest. Someone, likely Robert, had made sure every agency knew exactly where to look. "You've been busy," I said with a faint smile. Robert's expression held a trace of pride. "Former teacher, remember?" I know how to research a problem. A court summons caught my attention next. Daniel's sentencing was scheduled for the following week before Judge Patricia Collins. Given his prior fraud conviction and probation violations, the prosecutor was recommending 6 months in county jail. "He's tried applying for work at 3 different construction firms," Robert said, producing a set of rejection letters. "Every one of them ran a background check. Nobody's hiring a man facing multiple felonies." Then came the most disturbing discovery: text message printouts. They showed escalating threats from contacts labeled Tony M. and Mike Ice. The numbers were attached to messages about tens of thousands in unpaid gambling debts. "50,000 here, 30,000 there," Robert said grimly. "Interest rates doubling every month." "These people don't bluff," I said, my stomach tightening as I read one message describing exactly what they'd do if Daniel didn't pay. "That's why he's hiding in the shelter. It's harder for them to find him there." Robert gathered the papers neatly, tapping the stack on the table. "His whole world collapsed in 3 weeks, Michael," he said quietly. "Everything he tried to steal from you is gone." I poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one across to him. The smell filled the kitchen. A smell that once triggered dread now carried comfort. "Funny," I said. "This drink used to mean violence in this house. Now it's just coffee again." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 old men drinking coffee, reviewing the fall of a man who'd believed he could manipulate everyone forever. "What about Sarah?" I asked finally. Robert's expression turned serious. "That's a different story, and it's not over yet." Sarah's downfall had unfolded differently from Daniel's, but with equal devastation. While he faced financial ruin, she faced the collapse of every human connection she'd ever built. The domestic battery charge carried serious consequences under Massachusetts law. Judge Martinez had been firm during her arraignment: 18 months of probation, mandatory anger management, and a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting me. "She's violated the order twice already," Robert told me one afternoon over lunch at a diner downtown. "Showed up at your house both times while you were out grocery shopping." Neighbors reported it. I set down my sandwich, appetite gone. "What did she want?" "Claimed she left important documents in her old room," Robert said, flipping open his notebook. "Second time, she was just sitting on your porch crying." Each violation had led to more hearings, more fines, and extended probation terms. Sarah was learning what Daniel never had: that consequences don't vanish when ignored. They compound, like interest on a bad debt. Her job situation had collapsed too. The retail manager position she'd once held disappeared within hours of her mugshot appearing in the local paper. No store wanted someone convicted of domestic violence dealing with customers. "She's staying at the women's shelter on Madison," Robert said. "Lost the apartment when the lease expired. Landlord wouldn't renew after the police showed up twice." The divorce proceedings grew nastier by the week. Daniel blamed Sarah for calling the police, while Sarah blamed him for the forged debts and ruined finances. Their shared lawyer had already withdrawn for non-payment. Robert slid another paper across the table. "She's tried calling you 17 times last Tuesday alone. Left 9 voicemails before the phone company blocked her number." I nodded. "I haven't listened to any of them." "She's used payphones, borrowed cell phones, even the shelter's line," Robert said quietly. "She doesn't seem to understand that it's over." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This came to my address yesterday. Figured she knew you wouldn't open mail from her directly." The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in Sarah's careful script. I read only the first paragraph before folding it shut. "She wants another chance." "What are you going to do?" Robert asked. I looked out the diner window at the quiet street, people walking dogs, chatting, carrying coffee cups, ordinary lives untouched by betrayal. "Nothing," I said finally. "She made her choice years ago when she chose Daniel over decency." Robert hesitated. "The counselor says she's showing progress. Court reports show full attendance, active participation." "Good for her," I said flatly, signaling the waitress for the check. "Maybe she'll learn something for her next family." Robert studied my face. "You're really done with her?" "She threw boiling coffee at me to defend a man who was stealing my life," I said, counting out cash for lunch. My voice stayed calm, final. Some bridges burned too hot to rebuild. The drive home was quiet. We didn't talk much. There was nothing left to say. When we turned onto my street, I saw something small resting against my front door. A bouquet, daisies and baby's breath, the kind Sarah used to pick from my garden when she was little. "She was here again," Robert murmured. I picked up the flowers and dropped them straight into the garbage can beside the porch. "Let me know if she contacts you again," Robert said. "Your lawyer can send another cease and desist." Inside, the house felt peaceful for the first time in years. Afternoon sunlight spilled through clean windows onto furniture I'd finally arranged to my own liking. My home, my space, restored. I set the kettle on the stove to make tea, then the phone rang. Unknown number, probably Sarah calling from another borrowed phone. I let it ring. 1 month after the morning that changed everything, I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and the newspaper, finally able to enjoy both without fear of interruption. The November light had softened now, golden and calm, casting familiar shadows across the same table where Sarah once tried to destroy my life with forged papers. The locksmith had done excellent work: new deadbolts, reinforced door frames, and a home security system that chimed softly whenever someone approached. These weren't paranoid measures. They were necessary boundaries, practical safeguards against people who had already crossed every line imaginable. The phone rang again, and this time I answered without hesitation. The caller ID showed a name I'd been waiting to see. "Michael, it's Margaret from Food and Travel magazine. Ready to get back to work?" "More than ready," I said, swiveling my chair toward the window overlooking my newly restored garden. "What do you have for me?" "Portland's buzzing," she said. 3 new restaurants, Vietnamese fusion, farm to table, and something called deconstructed comfort food. Interested? Send me the details." I opened my calendar app, smiling at how empty it was. No family drama, no fake emergencies, just peace. "I can fly out next week." For 30 years, I'd lived 2 separate lives. To my family, I was Michael Fisher, the retired mechanic. Humble pension, modest house, a man who needed their help to get by. But behind that mask was the truth. Michael Fisher, the food critic, well-traveled, financially independent, respected for his honest reviews and meticulous palate. The deception had been necessary. Sarah's mother had never understood my passion for writing about food. To her, it was an indulgence, less legitimate than fixing engines. After her death, I kept the secret partly out of habit, partly out of protection. I'd sensed even then that Sarah's relationship with money was complicated. "How long's it been since your last review?" Margaret asked. 4 months, I said, scrolling through hidden folders filled with restaurant reports from Seattle, Denver, Charleston. Had to take some personal time, family issues. "Well," she said cheerfully, "sounds like those issues have resolved themselves." If only she knew how true that was. After we hung up, I walked slowly through my home, taking in the quiet satisfaction of small victories. The garage was back to normal, tools neatly arranged after years of Daniel's chaos. The spare bedroom, once their territory, had been reclaimed. Fresh paint, new linens, my computer desk restored to its rightful place by the window. In my office, behind a concealed panel I'd built years ago, my professional files were still intact: press credentials, correspondence with editors, financial records. The foundation of a life I'd built in secret, one that had quietly funded the comfort my family believed was born from a meager pension. A knock came at the back door. Robert stood there with a bottle of wine and that familiar glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "Final court date was today," he said, stepping in and taking his usual chair. "Daniel got 8 months in county. Sarah, 2 years probation and restitution." "How much restitution?" $15,000, he said. "For the damages plus court costs. She'll be sending you checks every month for the next 5 years," and he uncorked the wine with practiced ease. I accepted the glass, considering the irony. The daughter who once tried to steal my home would now be paying me to repair it, her betrayal converted into structured repayments. "To justice," Robert said, raising his glass. "To peace," I replied. Outside, the garden was coming back to life, fresh mulch around the roses my wife had planted, new herbs sprouting where weeds once grew. The physical space was healing right alongside everything else. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Flight details attached. Portland awaits your expert opinion." For the first time in months, I smiled without reservation. The woman who tried to destroy me was facing her consequences. The man who tried to rob me of my life's work was behind bars, and Michael Fisher, both versions of him, was finally free to live as one. Tomorrow, I'd book the flight to Portland. Tonight, I'd plan my route through the city's best kitchens, my appetite for honest food and honest living fully restored. The house settled around me with gentle, familiar sounds: the hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of the furnace, the steady tick of the grandfather clock, all reminders that time, at last, belonged entirely to me. Perfect. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.